I promise. This won't hurt a bit. Welcome back, friends. Happy Monday. I hope you're all doing well. You know, just like they say doctors and nurses make the worst patients, most of the bike mechanics that I've known over the course of my life don't really fritter and fret about the mechanical workings of their bicycles. But still, it's good to do a little walk around every once in a while and just get it up in the air and make sure that everything's still working right, that things haven't loosened up on you. And it's something that we all should be doing, on a pretty regular basis, especially if you ride the bike a lot. You may be saying to yourself, Chris, well, I ride the bike all the time. Certainly I would know if something was wrong. Not necessarily. Have you ever had an old car and the steering wheel gets kind of loose? And it happens gradually over time. And then somebody else gets in your car and says, why do you have 12 inches of play, Greg, in your steering wheel? I can hear him screaming right now. There's not 12 inches. It wasn't. It was an old van. But anyway, I thought I would bring the trucker in and, get it up in the stand and just show you kind of the things that I look at, just to make sure everything's working right. So without further ado, all right, so you're gonna not necessarily need a stand to do this, but you're definitely gonna want to be able to get the rear wheel off the ground. The first thing I do is, it's kind of a nervous tick at this point, but I just kind of grab the wheel and give it a little side to side just to make sure there's no play in the hubs. And I'll do that with the front and the rear wheel. Not likely, but like I said, it's just people would bring bikes in, and as they were telling me what was wrong, I just kind of instinctively grabbed the wheel and just to see if there was any play in the hubs. And like I said, it's turned into kind of a nervous tick at this point. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check the chain for wear, and I'm going to do that with a chain checker. This is the shop model from Park. There are consumer models out there as well. Any of these things that I talk about, I'm sure if your local bike shop doesn't have them, they can order them for you. If that's not convenient, I will put links down in the description to some of the items that, I think are worthwhile. So once I've checked the chain, I'm going to lube the chain. Now, this is a great opportunity to, at the very least, wipe the chain off. If you've got any derailleur cake in your pulleys, clean that up. Everything on this bike was pretty clean, so I just took a blue towel and wiped the chain off, and then I lubed the chain. Now, one of the questions that I've gotten repeatedly over the years is, what lube should I use? My answer had always been the one that's closest to your hand. It's never really mattered to me. Some people get really precious about the lube they use. They're convinced that this lube's better than that lube. I don't really care. If I was held down and forced to name a lube, I guess I would say Dumontech. It's a lube that you don't see in shops all that much, but it works really well. They've got a couple of different formulas. The way that I lube my chain is I'm going to find a place that I can find again. Most bikes now have connecting links. If your bike doesn't have a connecting link, but you've got a Shimano chain that's pinned together, that pin that's used to put the chain together generally looks a little different than the rest. You can use that as a reference. If you can't do either of those things, just take a Sharpie and mark one of the pins. So once I've done that, I'm going to put 1 drop of lube on every roller. Just 1 drop. I mean, if it's 2, that's fine. I don't need lube all over the outside of the chain. I don't need it in the pulleys. I certainly don't need it on the cassette. I just need it in between the pins and rollers of the chain. I work my way all the way around, and then you wipe off the excess that's on the outside. If you do that, not only will this little bottle of lube last a really long time, but your drivetrain's going to last longer. Because if you've got lube all over the outside, that's just going to pick up grit from the road. That's going to get in between the chain. It's just going to wear everything out faster. So that's the way I do it. It doesn't mean that's the way you have to do it, but it's worked for me. The next thing I want to do is inspect the shift cable and housing at the rear derailleur. Now, this is only going to be relevant if you've got externally routed cables and you don't have full-length cable housing. Especially if you're running indexed shifting, this little piece of housing is extremely important because the stiffness of that piece of housing kind of makes or breaks the accuracy of your shifting. So there's a way that you can get that all apart without pulling the whole cable out. And that is you just shift your bike into the biggest cog in the back, stop, then without pedaling, shift the bike into the smallest cog. That's going to give you a bunch of slack in that shift cable and allow you to remove the housing from these cable stops. At that point, you can inspect the ferrules and you can see if any gunk, any oxidation, if there's anything going on with that shift cable. This is also an opportunity if you do have a little oxidation, but it's not bad. You can use a little steel wool on the cable. Shout out to Tom Pettigo, the king of steel wool. And then you can add a little lube, a very small amount on your finger, just rub it back and forth on the cable, and then put everything back together. And when you start pedaling the bike again, voila, that cable's gonna cinch back up right where it's supposed to be. The next thing I want to look at is the rim itself. I'm going to wipe down the rim, wipe the braking surface. What I'm looking for are little small cracks at the eyelet where the nipple, goes in. I want to wipe the spokes down. I want to check the braking surface. If you've got rim brakes and the rim is got some age on it, you can just kind of feel the braking surface, because as those things get older, they'll actually cup out. And that's when you know that braking surface is getting pretty thin, and you want to think about, replacing that wheel or having it rebuilt. That's one of the things that in the big bike shop we would see all the time. People would bring their bikes in for tune-ups, meaning they were in relatively good shape, but we would find little cracks in those rims that the customer never saw because he never looked at it. I'll also take the opportunity to wipe off the hub. Again, look at the flanges of the hub where the spokes go in, make sure there's nothing going on there. That's a good way to, potentially catch something that could be kind of catastrophic out on the road, and you don't want that to happen. That little trick to inspect the cable and housing on your rear derailleur will also work with your brakes if you're running, obviously rim brakes like a V brake or a cantilever brake. You can do the same thing by opening up the brakes and then taking that housing from the brake lever to the cable stop, pulling it out, inspect the cable. I was going to do that on this bike, but the brakes are moving pretty freely. There's a lot of moisture in the air down here in Southwest Florida, and there's some, decent amount of salt in the air as well. That rear brake cable specifically on this bike is going to need to be replaced probably sooner than later, but I'm not really ready to do that yet, so I'll let it go for a little while longer. And that's about it. Those are the steps that I go through to just make sure nothing's gonna fall apart on me when I'm riding any one of my bicycles. This is stuff that you may do, maybe you don't, and if you don't, maybe you'll think about doing. Hopefully it's been helpful at the very least. I do appreciate you watching. If you like the videos, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't. I hope something good happens to you today. Until next time, be nice, work hard, ride bikes, play music when you can. I'll talk to you soon.